The morning alarm pierced through the thin walls of Travis Moore's studio apartment at 4:30 a.m., but he was already awake. Sleep had become a luxury he couldn't afford, not when his mind raced through calculations of overdue bills, medication costs, and the dwindling balance in his checking account. Travis sat on the edge of his narrow bed, staring at the purple heart metal gathering dust on his makeshift nightstand, a cardboard box that once held his daughter's school supplies. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. At 35, Travis carried himself with the invisible weight of a man who had commanded respect in places most people would never see. His shoulders, still broad from years of military conditioning, now curved slightly inward, a posture learned from months of rejection letters and dismissive glances from hiring managers who saw former Marine and immediately thought damaged goods or too intense for corporate culture. The framed photograph beside his medal showed a different man entirely. Staff Sergeant Travis Moore in full dress uniform standing beside his late wife Elena at their military housing in Camp Pendleton, California. Elena's radiant smile seemed to mock the reality of their cramped apartment in downtown Phoenix, where Travis now struggled to provide for their 9-year-old daughter, Sophia, on his own. Elena had been everything Travis wasn't: diplomatic where he was direct, patient where he was driven, optimistic where he now felt defeated. She had believed in his potential beyond the military, had encouraged him to pursue the engineering degree he'd started through online courses during his deployments. But breast cancer had stolen her away 2 years ago, along with their savings, their stability, and Travis's faith that hard work and sacrifice guaranteed anything. "Daddy?" Sophia's voice drifted from the pull-out couch that served as her bedroom in their cramped living space. Her dark hair, so much like Elena's, fell across her face as she struggled to sit up. "Is it time for school already?" Travis forced his expression into something resembling cheerfulness as he moved to help his daughter. Sophia's cerebral palsy affected her mobility and speech, requiring physical therapy sessions they could barely afford and specialized equipment that insurance covered only partially. The walker beside her couch, a bright pink contraption that Sophia had decorated with princess stickers, represented hope and financial burden in equal measure. "Not yet, mija," Travis said, using Elena's pet name for their daughter. "You've got another hour, just Daddy getting ready for work." Work. The word tasted bitter in Travis's mouth. For 15 years, he had served his country with distinction. 2 tours in Afghanistan, 1 in Iraq, leading reconnaissance missions that required split-second decisions affecting the lives of his fellow Marines. He had been decorated for valor, recognized for leadership, and trusted with intelligence that shaped military operations across 3 theaters of conflict. Now he pushed a mop bucket through the sterile corridors of Meridian Tech Solutions, a software development company housed in a gleaming 40-story tower in Phoenix's financial district. The same tactical thinking that had kept his unit alive in hostile territory was now applied to efficiently cleaning bathrooms and emptying trash cans before the real employees arrived to begin their important work. Travis pulled on his janitor's uniform, a shapeless blue shirt with Meridian Maintenance embroidered above the pocket, and caught sight of himself in the bathroom mirror. The man staring back bore little resemblance to the confident Marine who had once briefed generals on battlefield strategy. His brown eyes, once sharp with purpose, now carried the dull exhaustion of someone surviving rather than living. The irony wasn't lost on him. Meridian Tech Solutions had been built by government contracts, many involving military applications. The same type of strategic software development that Travis understood intimately from his intelligence work. He could have contributed meaningfully to their projects, could have applied his operational experience to their security protocols, could have been an asset rather than just another invisible service worker. But hiring managers saw his military background as a liability in corporate environments. Too rigid, they said, might not adapt well to collaborative culture. We're looking for someone with more traditional business experience. The same discipline and leadership that had earned him commendations in combat became obstacles in conference rooms where his directness was interpreted as aggression and his efficiency as impatience with corporate bureaucracy. Travis checked his phone for the time and felt his stomach drop. Sophia's physical therapy appointment was scheduled for tomorrow afternoon, but he'd received an automated reminder that their account was past due. The clinic required payment before continuing treatment, $400 he didn't have, for therapy that Sophia needed to maintain her mobility and independence. He walked to the kitchen, such as it was, and began preparing Sophia's breakfast and medication. Her daily routine included anti-seizure medication that cost $180 per month even with their basic insurance plan. Travis had already stretched their grocery budget thin, choosing between fresh vegetables and Sophia's prescriptions, always choosing the prescriptions. "Daddy looks sad," Sophia observed with the unsettling perceptive that children sometimes possessed. She had positioned herself on the couch, working through the morning stretches her physical therapist had taught her. When things are like this, Sophia understands more about our situation than Travis wished she had to. "Daddy looks sad," Travis replied, though they both knew it was more complicated than that. Sophia had inherited Elena's emotional intelligence along with her bright spirit. She understood more about their circumstances than Travis wished she had to. The morning news played softly on their secondhand television, featuring a story about veteran unemployment rates and suicide statistics that made Travis reach for the remote. He couldn't afford the luxury of depression, not when Sophia needed him to function, to provide, to keep fighting battles that felt increasingly unwinnable. Travis had applied for 127 positions since Elena's death. Engineering firms, defense contractors, corporate security, project management, anything that might utilize his skills and education. He had been overqualified for some positions, under-credentialed for others. His military experience was either irrelevant or intimidating, never quite the right fit for companies that claimed to value veterans while consistently hiring candidates with more traditional backgrounds. The janitor position at Meridian Tech had been a last resort, accepted only because Sophia's insurance required continuous employment and their savings had dwindled to double digits. Travis had told himself it would be temporary, just until something better came along. That was 8 months ago. As he prepared to leave for his shift, night maintenance from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., allowing him to care for Sophia during the day, Travis caught sight of Elena's picture one more time. She had believed in him absolutely, had seen potential that now felt like delusion. He wondered what she would think of the man he had become, whether she would recognize the defeated stranger wearing her husband's face. Sophia was settling back into sleep when Travis kissed her forehead goodbye. "Love you, Daddy," she murmured, the simple words carrying more weight than any medal or commendation he had ever received. Walking through the pre-dawn darkness toward Meridian Tech's imposing headquarters, Travis carried the weight of invisible battles that never appeared in his service record. The corporate tower rose against the Arizona sky like a monument to everything he couldn't access, couldn't achieve, couldn't provide for his daughter. In a few hours, he would mop the floors where software engineers discussed projects he could contribute to, clean the offices of executives who earned more in bonuses than he had made in entire years of military service. The same building that represented opportunity for others had become his symbol of limitation, a daily reminder of how far he had fallen from the man he used to be. Travis Moore, former staff sergeant and decorated combat veteran, disappeared into the service entrance of Meridian Tech Solutions to begin another night of invisible labor, carrying the Purple Heart courage that no one would ever see and the desperate hope that somehow, someday, his real value would be recognized before it was too late. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. The eviction notice arrived on a Tuesday morning, taped to Travis's apartment door like a scarlet letter announcing his failure to the entire building. The official letterhead from Sunset Manor Apartments felt heavy in his hands as he read the words that made his stomach drop. Final notice: pay or quit. You have 5 days to pay $2,400 in outstanding rent or vacate the premises. Travis stood in the hallway, still wearing his janitor's uniform from the night shift, and felt the walls of his carefully constructed survival plan crumble around him. 2 months behind on rent, despite working 6 nights a week at Meridian Tech and picking up weekend shifts at a local warehouse. The mathematics of poverty had finally caught up with him. Sophia's medical expenses, utilities, food, and rent simply exceeded what minimum wage could provide, no matter how many hours he worked. Mr. Moore. Mrs. Chen emerged from the apartment next door, her elderly face creased with concern. She had been their neighbor since they'd moved into the complex 18 months ago, back when Travis still believed things would get better. "Everything okay?" Travis quickly folded the notice, but Mrs. Chen's knowing expression suggested she had already seen similar papers taped to other doors in the building. Sunset Manor wasn't exactly luxury housing. It was where people landed when they were one step away from homelessness but still clinging to dignity. Inside their studio apartment, Sophia was working on homework at the small card table that served as their dining room, desk, and craft station. Her math worksheet was spread across the surface, and she was using the chunky pencils that made writing easier with her limited fine motor control. The sight of his daughter's determined concentration, tongue sticking out slightly as she worked through multiplication problems, made Travis's chest tighten with a mixture of pride and panic. How could he explain to a 9-year-old that they might be homeless by the end of the week? How could he maintain the illusion of stability that allowed Sophia to focus on normal childhood concerns, like homework and friendships, instead of survival? Travis walked to their tiny kitchen and opened the refrigerator, conducting his daily inventory of resources. A half-gallon of milk that would expire tomorrow, sandwich meat that Sophia had been eating for lunch all week, and leftover takeout from the Chinese restaurant where he'd splurged $12 on dinner 2 nights ago. A decision that now felt recklessly irresponsible. The bills scattered across the kitchen counter told the story of his financial descent in stark numbers. Sophia's physical therapy, $400 past due. Her seizure medication, $180 due in 3 days. Arizona Public Service, $267 overdue with a disconnection warning. His phone service, suspended yesterday for non-payment, cutting off his connection to potential job opportunities and emergency contact with Sophia's school. Travis pulled out his wallet and counted the contents for the 3rd time that morning. $47.32. His next paycheck from Meridian Tech wouldn't arrive for 5 days, and it would be $340 after taxes, enough to prevent utility disconnection, but nowhere near sufficient to address the rent situation. He had already explored every option his pride would allow. The VA had a 3-month waiting list for emergency housing assistance. Local charities had provided temporary help with groceries and utilities, but their resources were stretched thin across too many desperate families. His brother Marcus in Denver had offered to let them stay temporarily, but Travis couldn't afford bus tickets, and moving would mean disrupting Sophia's medical care and school stability. The sound of Sophia's walker approaching the kitchen made Travis quickly shuffle the bills into a drawer. She moved slowly but determinedly, having learned to navigate their cramped space with efficiency that broke his heart. Her bright pink walker, decorated with princess stickers that Elena had helped her apply before the cancer took hold, represented both her resilience and the medical expenses that were drowning them. "Daddy, I finished my math," Sophia announced, pride evident in her voice. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm getting better at multiplication tables." Travis knelt down to Sophia's level, reviewing her worksheet with the attention he had once devoted to mission briefings. Her handwriting was improving, and she had only missed 2 problems out of 20. "This is excellent work, Mija. Mom would be so proud of how hard you're working." Sophia beamed at the praise, then grew more serious. "Daddy, why did that man come to our door yesterday? He looked angry." Travis's stomach clenched. The building manager had made an unscheduled visit the previous evening, ostensibly to check on maintenance issues, but really to assess whether Travis was preparing to skip out on his rent obligations. The conversation had been tense, conducted in low voices while Sophia pretended to watch television. "Just building stuff, sweetheart, nothing for you to worry about." But Sophia's expression suggested she understood more than Travis wanted her to. At 9 years old, she had already learned the subtle signs of adult stress. The tight voices during phone conversations about money, the way Daddy's smile didn't quite reach his eyes anymore, the gradual disappearance of small luxuries like new coloring books or trips to the ice cream truck. Travis helped Sophia with her morning routine, medication, exercises, and getting ready for school, while his mind raced through increasingly desperate options. He could sell his truck, but it was worth maybe $800, and he needed transportation to work. He could pawn Elena's wedding ring, but that felt like betraying the last physical connection to their life together. He could take out a payday loan, but the interest rates would only deepen their financial hole. The irony of his situation felt like a physical weight pressing down on his shoulders. During his military service, Travis had been entrusted with multi-million-dollar equipment and life-or-death decisions affecting entire units. He had coordinated complex operations across hostile territories, managed logistics that kept fellow Marines alive and missions successful. But none of that expertise translated into the civilian skill of making $8.50 an hour stretch far enough to house and feed a disabled child. As Sophia prepared for school, chattering about an art project and a field trip she was excited about, Travis calculated the brutal mathematics of their situation. Even if he found a second full-time job immediately, they would need 6 weeks to catch up on rent, during which time the eviction process would likely be completed. Even if he qualified for emergency assistance, the bureaucratic timeline wouldn't align with their landlord's deadline. The school bus arrived outside their apartment complex with its familiar rumble and hydraulic wheeze. Travis walked Sophia to the curb, helping her navigate the few steps with her walker, while maintaining the cheerful facade that had become as much a part of his daily routine as brushing his teeth. "Have a good day at school, mija," Travis said, kissing her forehead as she boarded the bus. The driver, Mrs. Rodriguez, had been patient and kind about Sophia's mobility needs, and Travis was grateful for small kindnesses in a world that increasingly felt hostile to families like theirs. "Love you, Daddy," Sophia called from her seat, waving through the window as the bus pulled away. Travis stood on the sidewalk watching the bus disappear around the corner, carrying his daughter toward a day of normal childhood experiences, learning, playing, laughing with friends who didn't know that her home situation was precarious. For 8 hours, Sophia would exist in a world where adults handled difficult problems, and children could focus on being children. Walking back toward their apartment builder, Travis caught sight of himself in a parked car's window. The man staring back looked older than his 35 years, worn down by the constant stress of juggling impossible financial demands while trying to maintain the illusion of stability for his daughter. His shoulders, once squared with military bearing, now curved inward with the posture of defeat. The eviction notice waited on their kitchen table like a ticking bomb. 5 days to produce $2,400 or become homeless with a disabled child who requires consistent medical care and educational stability. 5 days to somehow transform from invisible janitor into the provider his daughter needed him to be. Travis Moore, former staff sergeant and decorated combat veteran, sat in his studio apartment surrounded by bills he couldn't pay and stared at a future that offered no clear path forward. The same man who had once led Marines through enemy territory now faced an enemy he couldn't outflank, outfight, or overcome through courage and tactical thinking. For the first time since Elena's death, Travis allowed himself to consider the possibility that his best efforts might not be enough to save them. The Phoenix Corporate Center buzzed with its usual afternoon energy as Travis arrived for what he hoped would be a breakthrough. He had spent his lunch break from the warehouse job, a weekend gig loading trucks that paid cash under the table, researching Meridian Tech's executive team online at the public library. After 8 months of cleaning their offices, he knew their schedules, their habits, and their routines better than most employees. CEO Terry Garcia was known for her 3 p.m. jogs around the corporate plaza, a ritual she maintained religiously according to the company newsletter Travis had found in her office trash. The same newsletter that featured articles about Meridian Tech's commitment to veteran hiring and community support. Corporate speak that felt like mockery when Travis read it while emptying her wastebasket. Terry Garcia had built Meridian Tech from a small software consultancy into a major defense contractor, specializing in tactical communication systems and battlefield management software. At 42, she was featured regularly in business magazines as one of Phoenix's most successful female entrepreneurs. Her corner office on the 40th floor contained awards from veteran organizations and framed photos with military officials, all celebrating her company's contributions to national defense. The irony wasn't lost on Travis that he had been cleaning the office of someone who profited from military expertise while refusing to hire actual veterans for anything beyond custodial work. Travis positioned himself near the building's main entrance, trying to look casual while monitoring the executive elevator bank. His plan was simple in concept but terrifying in execution. Approach Terry Garcia directly, explain his situation, and ask for a chance to prove his worth in a role that matched his capabilities. It was a desperate gambit, but desperation had become his primary motivating force. At exactly 3:07 p.m., Terry Garcia emerged from the elevator wearing designer athletic wear that probably cost more than Travis made in a week. She moved with the confident stride of someone accustomed to controlling her environment, her expensive running shoes silent against the marble lobby floor. Travis recognized her immediately from the corporate photos, though seeing her in person revealed an intensity that static images couldn't capture. "Miss Garcia," Travis called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "Could I speak with you for just a moment?" Terry paused, her expression shifting from mild annoyance to curious recognition. As CEO of a major corporation, she was accustomed to being approached by employees, vendors, and various people seeking her attention. But something about Travis's posture, military bearing despite his obvious nervousness, caught her interest. "You're the night janitor," she said, her voice carrying neither warmth nor hostility. "Travis, right? I've seen you around the building." The fact that she knew his name surprised Travis. In his experience, executives rarely notice maintenance staff, let alone remember their names. "Yes, ma'am, Travis Moore. I was hoping to speak with you about a potential opportunity within the company." Terry's eyebrows rose slightly. In her 15 years running Meridian Tech, she had been approached by countless employees seeking promotions, raises, or opportunities, but she couldn't recall a janitor ever requesting a meeting in the corporate lobby. What kind of opportunity? Travis took a deep breath, knowing he had perhaps 60 seconds to make an impression before Terry Garcia dismissed him and continued with her afternoon routine. "Ma'am, I'm a former Marine with 15 years of experience in military intelligence and tactical operations. I've been studying Meridian Tech's projects for months, and I believe I could contribute significantly to your defense contracts and security protocols." Terry's expression shifted from polite interest to skeptical amusement. She had heard similar pitches from countless overconfident applicants who believed their military experience qualified them for complex technical roles. "Mr. Moore, I appreciate your service, but our technical positions require specific educational credentials and industry experience. Have you considered applying through our normal HR channels?" "I have, ma'am, multiple times. My applications have been rejected without interviews." Travis pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a printed copy of his military record that he had prepared for this moment. "I led reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, managed intelligence operations involving the same type of communication systems that Meridian Tech develops. I understand battlefield implementation of the software your company creates." Terry's expression shifted from polite interest to skeptical amusement. She had heard similar pitches from countless overconfident applicants who believed their military experience qualified them for complex technical roles. "Mr. Moore, I appreciate your service, but our technical positions require specific educational credentials and industry experience. Have you considered applying through our normal HR channels? I have, ma'am, multiple times. My applications have been rejected without interviews. Travis pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a printed copy of his military record that he had prepared for this moment. I led reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, managed intelligence operations involving the same type of communication systems that Meridian Tech develops. I understand battlefield implementation of the software your company creates. Terry's expression shifted from polite interest to skeptical amusement. She had heard similar pitches from countless overconfident applicants who believed their military experience qualified them for complex technical roles. Mr. Moore, I appreciate your service, but our technical positions require specific educational credentials and industry experience. Have you considered applying through our normal HR channels? I have, ma'am, multiple times. My applications have been rejected without interviews. Travis pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a printed copy of his military record that he had prepared for this moment. I led reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, managed intelligence operations involving the same type of communication systems that Meridian Tech develops. I understand battlefield implementation of the software your company creates. Terry's expression shifted from polite interest to skeptical amusement. She had heard similar pitches from countless overconfident applicants who believed their military experience qualified them for complex technical roles. Mr. Moore, I appreciate your service, but our technical positions require specific educational credentials and industry experience. Have you considered applying through our normal HR channels? I have, ma'am, multiple times. My applications have been rejected without interviews. Travis pulled a folded paper from his pocket, a printed copy of his military record that he had prepared for this moment. I led reconnaissance missions in Afghanistan and Iraq, managed intelligence operations involving the same type of communication systems that Meridian Tech develops. I understand battlefield implementation of the software your company creates. Terry glanced at Travis more carefully, recognizing something in his posture that reminded her of her own military contractors, men and women who parried themselves with the controlled tension of people accustomed to high-stakes decisions. There was also something desperate in his eyes that suggested this conversation represented more than career advancement. What's your current financial situation, Mr. Moore? The question surprised them both. Terry wasn't sure why she had asked something so personal, but Travis's obvious desperation had triggered her curiosity about the circumstances that led qualified veterans to accept janitor positions. Travis hesitated, unsure whether honesty would help or hurt his cause. My daughter has cerebral palsy and requires ongoing medical care. The insurance and steady paycheck from the maintenance position have been necessary, but we're facing eviction. I need an opportunity that pays enough to actually support my family. Terry felt an unexpected stab of recognition. Her own father had been a veteran who struggled with civilian employment after his military service, cycling through jobs that didn't utilize his skills while her mother worked multiple positions to keep their family afloat. She had built Meridian Tech partly to prove that veteran expertise had value in corporate environments. "You maintain your physical fitness?" Terry asked, the question seeming to come from nowhere. Travis blinked, confused by the apparent non sequitur. "Yes, ma'am. I run 5 miles every morning before my daughter wakes up." Terry's expression shifted to something that might have been amusement. She had been jogging the same route for 3 years, maintaining her fitness as both stress relief and competitive discipline. The idea of testing someone's determination through physical challenge appealed to her business instincts. "Here's what we're going to do, Mr. Moore," Terry said, her voice taking on the tone she used when making executive decisions. "Tomorrow afternoon, 3 p.m., meet me at the Plaza Fountain. We're going to race a 4-mile loop around the corporate district. If you can keep up with me, I'll give you a real interview for a position that matches your qualifications." Travis stared at her, uncertain whether she was serious or mocking him. "Ma'am?" "If you beat me," Terry continued, her competitive nature fully engaged, "I'll double whatever salary we eventually offer you." She extended her hand with the confidence of someone accustomed to making deals. "Do we have an agreement?" Travis shook her hand, feeling the firm grip of someone who negotiated multi-million-dollar contracts. "Yes, ma'am. Thank you for this opportunity." "Don't thank me yet," Terry replied, already calculating the route and distance in her mind. "I've been running competitively for 20 years. I hope your confidence in your physical conditioning is justified." As Terry headed toward the plaza for her regular jog, Travis stood in the corporate lobby feeling as though the ground had shifted beneath his feet. In the span of 5 minutes, his desperate plea for employment had transformed into a physical challenge that would determine his family's future. Walking back toward the parking garage where his truck was parked, Travis felt the first stirrings of hope he had experienced in months. Terry Garcia had agreed to give him a real chance, not charity or sympathy, but an opportunity to prove his worth through direct competition. That evening, as Sophia worked on homework and Travis prepared for his night shift at Meridian Tech, he found himself calculating distance and pace for tomorrow's race. His morning runs had been maintenance exercises, stress relief in the pre-dawn darkness before Phoenix's heat became unbearable. Tomorrow's race would be performance under pressure, with stakes higher than any physical challenge he had faced since military service. Terry Garcia had no idea that the janitor she had agreed to race was a former Force Reconnaissance Marine who had completed some of the military's most demanding physical training programs. She saw a desperate employee seeking advancement, not a combat veteran whose physical conditioning had been literally a matter of life and death. Tomorrow afternoon would reveal whether Travis Moore's military training could translate into the opportunity his family desperately needed, or whether his last chance at stability would disappear in the Arizona heat of a corporate plaza racetrack. The alarm clock's shrill cry at 4:30 a.m. found Travis already wide awake, staring at the ceiling of their cramped apartment. Sleep had been impossible, with tomorrow's race consuming his thoughts and adrenaline coursing through his system like electricity. In 12 hours, he would either secure a real opportunity for his family or lose what might be his last chance at climbing out of their financial pit. Travis slipped quietly from bed, careful not to wake Sophia, and pulled on his running gear in the darkness. His morning routine had become sacred over the past months. 5 miles through Phoenix's empty streets before the sun painted the sky orange and pink. But today felt different. Today's run wasn't just stress relief or fitness maintenance. It was reconnaissance for the most important race of his life. The pre-dawn air carried the crisp coolness that would disappear within hours, replaced by the brutal Arizona heat that made afternoon running a test of endurance as much as speed. Travis's breath formed small clouds as he stretched beside his truck, working through the flexibility routine that had been drilled into him during Force Reconnaissance training 15 years earlier. As he began his run through the quiet streets of downtown Phoenix, Travis's mind shifted into the analytical mode that had kept him alive during combat missions. The corporate plaza where he would face Terry Garcia covered approximately 4 square miles, with elevation changes and surface variations that would affect pace and strategy. He had jogged portions of this route during his regular runs, but never with the tactical awareness he now applied to every turn and incline. Travis knew from cleaning Terry's office that she kept a detailed training log in her desk drawer, a leather-bound journal documenting her daily runs with obsessive precision. Her typical pace for 4-mile runs averaged 7 minutes and 30 seconds per mile, impressive for a 42-year-old executive, but well within Travis's capabilities if he managed his energy correctly. What Terry Garcia didn't know was that Travis had completed the Marines' grueling Force Reconnaissance training, a program with a 90% dropout rate that pushed human endurance beyond normal limits. His personal best for 4 miles was 24 minutes and 18 seconds, achieved during a training exercise in North Carolina's humid summer heat while carrying a 30-pound pack. But that was 8 years ago, before civilian life, financial stress, and single parenthood had gradually eroded the peak conditioning that military service had demanded. Travis was still fit. His morning runs and occasional weekend warehouse work had maintained basic cardiovascular health, but he wasn't the finely tuned machine he had been as an active-duty Marine. Returning to their apartment complex as the first hints of sunrise touched the horizon, Travis found Sophia awake and struggling with her morning medication routine. Her cerebral palsy made fine motor control challenging, and she often needed assistance opening pill bottles and measuring liquid medications. "Morning, mija," Travis said, kissing her forehead as he helped with the anti-seizure medication that cost $180 per month. "How are you feeling today?" "Better," Sophia replied, though Travis could hear the slight congestion that had been troubling her for the past week. Another concern he couldn't afford to address with their suspended health insurance and overdue medical bills. "Daddy, you look excited about something." Travis smiled at his daughter's perceptiveness. Despite their financial struggles, he had tried to shield Sophia from the worst of his stress and depression. But 9-year-olds were remarkably intuitive about adult emotions, especially children who had learned to read subtle cues as survival mechanisms. "I have an important meeting at work today," Travis explained, helping Sophia with her morning exercises. "It might lead to a better job, one that pays more money." Sophia's face brightened with hope that made Travis's chest tighten. She had absorbed enough adult conversations to understand that money was the source of most problems in their household, the reason they couldn't buy new clothes, go to movies, or replace her worn-out school backpack with something that didn't require duct tape repairs. "Will we be able to stay in our apartment?" Sophia asked, the question revealing how much she had overheard despite Travis's attempts to conduct financial conversations privately. Travis knelt beside his daughter's couch, meeting her eyes directly. "I'm going to do everything I can to make sure we stay together and safe, sweetheart. That's a promise." After getting Sophia ready for school and walking her to the bus stop, Travis returned to their apartment to prepare for his regular duties at Meridian Tech. His night shift schedule meant sleeping during the day, but the upcoming race had made rest impossible. Instead, he spent the morning researching Terry Garcia's background more thoroughly than he had ever investigated any military target. The public library's computers provided access to business journals and news articles that painted a picture of Terry Garcia as a formidable competitor in both business and personal challenges. She had completed 3 marathons, including Boston, and regularly participated in corporate athletic competitions. Her business philosophy emphasized performance under pressure and earning respect through results, principles that aligned perfectly with military culture. More importantly, Travis discovered that Terry had built Meridian Tech specifically to provide technology solutions for military applications. Her father had been a Vietnam veteran who struggled with civilian employment, and she had publicly stated that hiring qualified veterans was both a business priority and personal mission. The irony was bitter. Travis had been working as a janitor for a company whose CEO claimed to value veteran expertise, while his applications for technical positions had been systematically rejected by HR departments that apparently didn't share her priorities. By afternoon, Travis felt the familiar pre-mission tension that had preceded dangerous operations in Afghanistan and Iraq. His hands showed the slight tremor that always appeared before high-stakes situations, not fear, but controlled adrenaline that could be channeled into peak performance when properly managed. At 2:45 p.m., Travis arrived at the corporate plaza wearing his best athletic gear. Shoes that had seen better days but still provided adequate support, shorts and a shirt that were clean but clearly not expensive. The contrast with Terry Garcia's designer running outfit would be obvious, but Travis had learned to ignore equipment disadvantages and focus on performance. Terry was already stretching beside the fountain, her movements fluid and practiced. She nodded as Travis approached, her expression revealing nothing about her expectations or strategy. Around them, the plaza buzzed with normal corporate activity, employees taking coffee breaks, delivery trucks navigating the service roads, executives conducting business on phones while walking between buildings. "The route is 4 miles exactly," Terry explained, pointing toward markers she had apparently mapped previously. "Counterclockwise around the plaza, including the hill section near the parking structures. No shortcuts, no assistance, finish at this fountain." Travis nodded, studying the course with tactical awareness. The elevation changes would favor sustained endurance over sprint speed, and the afternoon heat would test both competitors' hydration and heat management strategies. "Are you ready, Mr. Moore?" Terry asked, her tone carrying the same authority she probably used in boardroom negotiations. "Yes, ma'am," Travis replied, falling back on military protocol that had become second nature during stressful situations. Terry checked her professional running watch, a device that probably cost more than Travis made in a month, and positioned herself at the informal starting line. "This isn't charity, Mr. Moore. I'm going to run my best race, and I expect you to do the same." Travis appreciated her directness. He had no interest in winning through sympathy or handicaps. His family's future depended on proving that he could compete at the highest levels when given the opportunity. "On your mark," Terry called, settling into a runner's crouch that demonstrated years of competitive experience. Travis positioned himself beside her, feeling muscle memory from military training override months of stress and financial worry. For the next 30 minutes, he wouldn't be a struggling single father or desperate job seeker. He would be Staff Sergeant Travis Moore, Force Recon Marine, competing for objectives that mattered more than personal comfort or convenience. "Set?" Terry continued, her voice taking on the intensity of someone who never lost gracefully.
Travis closed his eyes briefly, centering himself in the calm focus that had carried him through combat missions and impossible odds. When he opened them, his vision had sharpened to include only the race course and the competitor beside him. Go. The race began with Terry Garcia setting a punishing pace that immediately separated casual joggers from serious competitors. Her stride was economical and practiced, the result of 20 years of competitive running and an obsessive attention to form that had carried her through 3 marathons. Travis fell into step beside her, his military training automatically analyzing her rhythm and breathing patterns while calculating the sustainability of her chosen speed. For the first half-mile, they ran in relative silence through the corporate plaza's main thoroughfare, past glass towers housing law firms, consulting companies, and tech startups. Terry's breathing remained controlled and even, suggesting she was operating well within her comfort zone despite the aggressive pace. Travis matched her stride for stride, his longer legs allowing him to maintain her speed with slightly less effort, though he could already feel the Arizona heat beginning to affect his core temperature. "You're keeping up better than I expected," Terry said, her voice carrying just enough breath to indicate she was working but not struggling. "Most people would be falling behind by now." "I spent 15 years training for situations where falling behind meant people died," Travis replied, his own breathing still controlled despite the increasing pace. "This feels familiar." They rounded the first major turn, heading toward the elevation gain that would test both runners' cardiovascular conditioning and tactical patience. The course climbed steadily for nearly a mile through the financial district's parking structures and office complexes, an ascent that would separate runners who had trained specifically for hills from those who relied primarily on flat ground speed. As they began the climb, Travis noticed Terry's pace remained unchanged despite the increased workload. Her form stayed consistent, arms pumping efficiently, while her stride shortened slightly to accommodate the grade. She was either extremely well-conditioned or strategically burning energy reserves that would cost her later in the race. Travis had run this section of Phoenix dozens of times during his morning routines, but never at race pace with the pressure of his family's future riding on every step. The familiar landmarks, the Wells Fargo building, the courthouse, the small park where he sometimes rested during longer runs, now served as tactical checkpoints in a competition that would determine whether Sophia could keep her medical coverage and whether they would have a home next week. "Tell me about your military experience," Terry said, apparently using conversation as both strategy and genuine curiosity. "What did you do that makes you think you're qualified for technical positions at Meridian Tech?" Travis appreciated that she was conducting the interview while running, a multitasking challenge that revealed as much about candidates as formal conference room discussions. "Force reconnaissance, ma'am. Intelligence gathering and tactical communications in hostile environments. I spent 5 years managing the same type of battlefield network systems that your company develops for the Defense Department." "Force recon," Terry repeated, her pace slowing almost imperceptibly as she processed the implications. "That's not standard infantry. Those are the Marines who do the jobs that other Marines consider too dangerous." "Something like that," Travis confirmed, noting that Terry's knowledge of military specializations was more detailed than most civilians possessed. "A lot of technical problem-solving under pressure, coordinating multiple communication systems while maintaining operational security. They crested the hill at the 2-mile mark, both runners breathing more heavily, but neither showing signs of distress. The second half of the course was primarily downhill and flat, favoring runners who had managed their energy efficiently during the climb. Travis felt strong, his conditioning adequate for the distance despite months of financial stress that had disrupted his training routine. "My father was a veteran," Terry said, her voice carrying a personal note that hadn't been present during their business conversation the previous day. "Vietnam, Special Forces. He came home with skills that nobody valued in civilian jobs, ended up working construction until his back gave out." Travis understood the subtext of her revelation. Terry Garcia's commitment to hiring veterans wasn't just corporate social responsibility, it was personal history with the challenges that military personnel faced during the transition to civilian employment. Her father's experience had probably influenced her decision to build a company that valued battlefield expertise. "That's why you started Meridian Tech?" Travis asked, maintaining conversational tone despite the increased pace as they began the downhill section. "Partly," Terry admitted. "I wanted to prove that military experience could be an asset in corporate environments, not just something to overcome. But I also learned that good intentions don't matter if you can't identify the right people for the right positions." They passed the 3-mile marker with Terry still maintaining her aggressive pace, though you could see subtle signs that she was beginning to work harder. Her arm carriage had changed slightly, and her breathing had shifted from conversational to focused. The heat was affecting both runners now, with sweat staining their shirts despite the afternoon's relatively moderate temperature. Travis felt the familiar sensation of his body finding its optimal racing rhythm, the point where cardiovascular system, muscle efficiency, and mental focus aligned into sustainable performance. His force reconnaissance training had included extensive conditioning for operations in desert environments, and the Arizona heat felt manageable compared to the brutal conditions he had endured during Middle Eastern deployments. "You're keeping up better than I expected," Terry observed, her competitive nature clearly engaged by Travis's ability to match her pace. "What's your background in distance running?"
"Military training mostly," Travis replied, though he could feel his heart rate approaching the threshold where conversation would become difficult. "We did a lot of long-distance movement under combat loads. This feels light without equipment." Terry's expression shifted as she calculated the implications of competing against someone whose physical conditioning had been literally a matter of survival rather than recreation. Her business success had been built on accurate assessment of competitive advantages, and she was beginning to realize that she might have underestimated her opponent. As they approached the final mile, Terry made a tactical decision that revealed both her competitive instincts and her respect for Travis's performance. Instead of maintaining steady pace, she surged forward, testing whether Travis could respond to sudden changes in race dynamics. Travis felt the increase immediately, but didn't panic. Military training had taught him to expect unexpected challenges and respond with measured escalation rather than emotional reaction. He matched Terry's surge, staying close enough to her shoulder to maintain psychological pressure while conserving energy for a potential finishing kick. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Moore," Terry said, her breathing now clearly labored as the combined effects of pace, heat, and competitive pressure began to accumulate. "Force Recon taught me that surprises usually favor the person who's prepared for them," Travis replied, feeling his own conditioning being tested but not yet approaching his limits. They entered the final half-mile with Terry still leading, but Travis positioned strategically for whatever finishing tactics the race might require. Around them, the corporate plaza had filled with afternoon foot traffic. Employees heading to coffee shops, executives conducting walking meetings, office workers taking breaks from air-conditioned buildings. Some had noticed the informal race developing between the well-dressed CEO and the unknown runner in worn athletic gear. A small crowd was beginning to gather near the fountain finish line, attracted by the obvious intensity of the competition and perhaps recognizing Terry Garcia from business media coverage. Travis could see the fountain now, still several hundred yards ahead, but close enough to begin tactical consideration of his finishing strategy. His body felt strong despite the sustained effort, and his breathing remained controlled enough for sustained conversation. More importantly, he could sense that Terry was approaching the limits of her conditioning, her form beginning to show subtle signs of fatigue that would accumulate rapidly over the remaining distance. The race that had begun as a desperate employment gambit was transforming into something larger, a test of whether Travis Moore's military training and personal determination could overcome the institutional barriers that had kept him trapped in minimum-wage employment despite his qualifications. In less than 10 minutes, he would either prove that veteran expertise deserved recognition and opportunity, or confirm that even his best efforts weren't sufficient to escape the financial desperation that threatened his family's stability. The fountain grew larger with each stride, and Travis began to plan his final move. The final quarter-mile stretched ahead like a gauntlet of corporate judgment, with the fountain's bronze figures growing larger against the backdrop of Meridian Tech's gleaming headquarters. Travis could feel the accumulated heat and exertion beginning to test his conditioning. But more significantly, he could sense Terry Garcia's breathing pattern shifting from controlled effort to sustained struggle. Her stride, which had been metronomically consistent for 3¾ miles, now showed microscopic variations that his trained eye recognized as early indicators of fatigue. The small crowd gathering near the fountain had grown to several Meridian Tech employees who had recognized their CEO engaged in what appeared to be a serious race with an unknown competitor. Travis caught glimpses of faces he knew from his night shift cleaning duties: engineers whose offices he mopped, executives whose trash he emptied, administrative staff who had never acknowledged his existence during 8 months of invisible service. 200 meters, Terry called out, her voice carrying strain that hadn't been present during the earlier miles. "You've run a strong race, Mr. Moore, but I hope you're ready for the finish." Travis understood the warning. Terry Garcia hadn't built a multi-million-dollar company by accepting defeat gracefully, and her competitive instincts were fully engaged despite the obvious physical cost. She was preparing for a final surge that would test both runners' remaining reserves and tactical judgment. But Travis had spent 15 years in situations where understanding an opponent's capabilities could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Terry's breathing pattern, stride mechanics, and posture told him that she was operating near her maximum sustainable effort, while his force reconnaissance conditioning still provided reserves that civilian training rarely developed. At the 150-meter mark, Terry made her move. Her pace increased sharply, drawing on anaerobic energy systems, which would provide short-term speed at the cost of rapidly accumulating fatigue. It was a classic competitive strategy: surge early enough to discourage pursuit, but late enough to minimize the time spent operating beyond sustainable pace. Travis responded immediately, but tactically, increasing his speed to match Terry's acceleration without fully committing his own finishing kick. His military training had emphasized patience under pressure, the discipline to maintain strategic reserves until the optimal moment for decisive action. The crowd near the fountain had grown to nearly 50 people, including several Meridian Tech executives who had emerged from the building to witness their CEO's race. Travis recognized Dr. Sarah Martinez, the VP of Engineering whose office he cleans every Tuesday night, and Robert Kim, the Defense Contracts Director who often worked late reviewing classified proposals that Travis understood better than most Meridian Tech employees. "Come on, Terry," someone shouted from the crowd, corporate loyalty mixing with genuine excitement about the competition. Travis felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that had accompanied high-stakes operations in combat zones, the physiological response that training into performance when everything meaningful was at risk. His daughter's medical coverage, their apartment, Sophia's stability, all depended on the next 90 seconds of running. At 75 meters from the fountain, with Terry still maintaining her aggressive pace but beginning to show signs of oxygen debt, Travis made his tactical decision. Instead of the gradual acceleration that recreational runners typically employed, he unleashed the explosive finishing speed that force recon training had developed for situations requiring immediate and overwhelming response. The surge felt like shifting from cruising speed into combat mode, accessing energy systems and muscle recruitment patterns that civilian life rarely demanded. Travis's stride lengthened and quickened simultaneously, his form remaining efficient despite the dramatic pace increase. Within 10 strides, he had closed the gap that Terry's earlier acceleration had created. "Jesus," Terry gasped, her composure finally cracking as she realized the extent of Travis's remaining reserves. "What the hell are you?" "Someone who learned to finish missions no matter what," Travis replied, his breathing still controlled despite the increased effort. He pulled alongside Terry with 50 meters remaining, close enough that she could hear his steady respiration contrasting with her increasingly labored breathing. The crowd's energy shifted as spectators realized they were witnessing something beyond a casual corporate fitness challenge. This was a legitimate competition between a successful CEO and an unknown runner who was demonstrating capabilities that seemed inconsistent with his apparent position in the company hierarchy. Dr. Martinez stepped closer to the finish line, her expression puzzled as she tried to place Travis's face in her mental catalog of Meridian Tech employees. "Who is that guy racing Terry?" she asked Robert Kim, who was equally perplexed by the stranger's performance. "No idea," Kim replied, "but he's about to beat our CEO in front of half the executive team." With 30 meters remaining, Travis moved into the lead for the first time in the race. The transition was smooth and decisive, his longer stride carrying him past Terry's position without the desperation that characterized many finishing kicks. He had timed his surge perfectly, deploying overwhelming speed at the moment when his opponent had committed all available resources to her own acceleration. Terry's competitive instincts demanded a response, but her body had reached the physiological limits that recreational training imposed. She had run an excellent race by civilian standards, maintaining a pace that would have defeated most challengers. But she was competing against someone whose conditioning had been forged in circumstances where second place could mean death. The fountain loomed ahead, its bronze figure seeming to beckon Travis toward the finish line that represented far more than victory in an impromptu race. This was his opportunity to prove that veteran expertise deserved recognition, that his capabilities extended far beyond the minimum wage labor that had become his only option for survival. 20 meters, 15, 10. Travis crossed the finish line with a final surge that demonstrated he still possessed substantial reserves, his form remaining strong despite 4 miles of sustained effort in Arizona heat. He immediately turned to watch Terry complete the final strides, her determination carrying her across the line despite obvious exhaustion. Terry bent forward, hands on her knees, breathing heavily as she processed both the physical demands of the race and the professional implications of what had just occurred. Around them, the crowd buzzed with excited conversation about the unexpected competition they had witnessed. "Time?" Terry called to someone with a stopwatch, her voice still labored but already shifting back toward executive authority. 25 minutes, 18 seconds for the winner. 25:42 for second place. Travis felt a surge of satisfaction that had nothing to do with winning and everything to do with performance under pressure. He had run within 30 seconds of his personal best from 8 years earlier, proving that his conditioning remained solid despite months of financial stress and limited training resources. More importantly, he had demonstrated capabilities that couldn't be dismissed or overlooked. Terry Garcia now possessed first-hand evidence that her night janitor possessed attributes that extended far beyond custodial duties. "Mr. Moore," Terry said, straightening up with the recovered composure of someone accustomed to adapting quickly to unexpected circumstances, "I believe we have some things to discuss." The crowd began to disperse, but several Meridian Tech executives lingered, clearly curious about the identity and background of the runner who had just defeated their famously competitive CEO. Dr. Martinez approached with the direct manner that had made her successful in a male-dominated field. "I'm sorry, but I don't think we've been introduced," she said to Travis. "I'm Sarah Martinez, VP of Engineering. That was an impressive performance." Travis accepted her handshake, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact that suggested professional respect despite their obvious differences in corporate status. "Travis Moore, I work the night maintenance shift." Dr. Martinez's expression shifted to surprise and then calculation as she processed the implications. A janitor had just outrun the CEO and demonstrated physical capabilities that suggested military or professional athletic background. The cognitive dissonance was obvious as she struggled to reconcile Travis's apparent position with his demonstrated performance. "Night maintenance," she repeated slowly, "and you run like that regularly?" "Every morning, though not usually with quite this much at stake." Terry Garcia had recovered sufficiently to rejoin the conversation, her competitive disappointment already transforming into business opportunity assessment. "Mr. Moore," Terry said, her voice carrying the authority of someone preparing to make an executive decision, "I believe I owe you a doubled salary offer and a serious conversation about your background and qualifications." Travis felt the first stirrings of hope he had experienced since Elena's death, the possibility that his desperate gambit might actually lead to the opportunity his family desperately needed. The race was over, but the real test was just beginning. The conference room on Meridian Tech's 38th floor had hosted countless high-stakes meetings, but none quite like the impromptu interview session that Terry Garcia convened within an hour of losing her race to the company's night janitor. Travis sat at the polished mahogany table, still wearing his running clothes, sweat-stained and clearly out of place among the executive furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows that offered panoramic views of Phoenix's sprawling metropolitan area. Dr. Sarah Martinez had joined them, along with Robert Kim from Defense Contracts and Patricia Wong, the VP of Human Resources, whose expression suggested she was struggling to process the unusual circumstances. Travis's personnel file lay open on the table, a thin folder containing his basic employment application, background check results, and performance evaluations that painted him as a reliable but unremarkable maintenance worker. "Let's start with the obvious question," Terry said, settling into her chair with the controlled energy of someone whose competitive instincts were fully engaged. "Your application lists previous experience as general maintenance and custodial services. That doesn't typically correlate with the kind of physical conditioning you just demonstrated." Travis had spent the past hour mentally preparing for this conversation, knowing that his desperate gambit had created an opportunity he couldn't afford to waste through poor communication or excessive humility. "I simplified my background on the application because my honest resume wasn't generating interviews. 15 years of military experience doesn't seem to translate well into civilian hiring practices." Patricia Wong leaned forward, her HR training clearly triggered by potential legal implications. "Mr. Moore, falsifying employment applications is grounds for immediate termination, regardless of your performance in other areas." "I didn't falsify anything," Travis replied calmly. "I have worked maintenance and custodial positions since leaving the military. I just didn't include my full background because it seemed to be working against me in the application process." Dr. Martinez opened her laptop and began typing rapidly. "What was your military occupation specialty?" "0321, Travis answered automatically, using the numerical designation that would mean nothing to civilians, but everything to military contractors like Meridian Tech. "Force reconnaissance." The room fell silent as the three executives processed the implications. Force reconnaissance Marines represented less than 1% of the Corps, selected through training programs with failure rates approaching 90%. These were the Marines who conducted deep penetration intelligence gathering, direct action missions, and specialized operations that conventional units couldn't handle. Robert Kim's expression shifted from curiosity to genuine interest. As Defense Contracts Director, he worked regularly with military liaisons and understood the significance of Travis's former role. 0321's work with tactical communication systems, battlefield intelligence networks, and classified reconnaissance platforms. That's exactly the kind of operational experience we need for our defense contracts. Which is why I applied for technical positions multiple times over the past year," Travis said, his voice carrying a trace of frustration that he immediately regretted. "My applications were rejected without interviews." Patricia Wong had the grace to look embarrassed as she flipped through Travis's file. I see 3 applications for engineering technician positions, 2 for systems analyst roles, and 1 for a project coordinator position in our defense division, all marked as not qualified by our screening software." "Screening software?" Terry repeated, her tone suggesting she was less than pleased with this revelation. "Our company prides itself on hiring veterans, and we're using automated systems that filter out military experience?" The tension in the room was palpable as Terry's business instincts warred with her growing anger about systemic problems in their hiring practices. Travis recognized the dynamics from his military experience, the moment when individual incompetence revealed institutional failures that demanded broader solutions. "Tell me about your technical background," Dr. Martinez said, eagerly to shift the conversation toward practical assessment. "What specific systems and technologies did you work with during your military service?" "I specialized in integrated communication networks for small unit operations, multi-platform coordination between ground forces, aviation assets, and command structures, a lot of real-time data analysis under hostile conditions. That's satellite communication integration, encrypted data transmission, and battlefield management software," Robert Kim translated for the benefit of his colleagues, "technologies that form the core of our current defense contracts. Which is why I spent 5 years managing those systems in combat environments, including 2 deployments where I was responsible for network security and counterintelligence protocols." Terry stood and moved toward the windows, her mind clearly processing the business implications of what they were discovering. "Mr. Moore, you've been working as our janitor for 8 months while possessing qualifications that could contribute to multi-million-dollar defense projects. How is that possible?" "Because military experience doesn't translate easily into corporate hiring practices, and because I needed immediate employment with health insurance for my daughter's medical care. The janitor position was the only offer I received." Dr. Martinez was taking notes rapidly, her engineering background helping her appreciate the technical depth that Travis represented. "What's your educational background? Do you have any formal technical certifications?" "Bachelor's degree in information systems completed through distance learning while active duty, security clearances through top secret, current until 2026, certified in multiple communication platforms and network security protocols." Patricia Wong looked increasingly uncomfortable as she realized to what extent their hiring practices had failed to identify qualified candidates. "Mr. Moore, I have to ask, why didn't you mention any of this during your initial interview for the maintenance position?"
"Because I was desperate," Travis answered honestly. "My daughter requires ongoing medical care that costs more than $1,500 per month. I needed any job that provided health insurance, even if it didn't utilize my qualifications." The room fell silent as the executives processed the human cost of their institutional failures. Terry returned to her seat, her expression suggesting she was formulating solutions rather than simply acknowledging problems. "Here's what we're going to do," Terry announced, her voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to making decisions that affected hundreds of employees. "Mr. Moore, effective immediately, you're promoted to Senior Systems Analyst in our Defense Contracts Division. Starting salary is $85,000 annually, full benefits, and since I promised to double whatever we offered if you won the race, we'll make it $170,000. Travis felt as though the floor had shifted beneath his feet. The salary Terry had just offered was more than he had ever earned, even during his military service. It represented not just financial stability, but the restoration of professional identity that had been stripped away by months of rejection and desperation. "Ma'am, I can't," Travis began, but Terry cut him off with a gesture. "Don't tell me you can't accept it. Tell me whether you can start Monday morning and begin contributing to projects that actually utilize your expertise." Dr. Martinez was already planning integration strategies. "We'll need to bring you up to speed on our current platforms and introduce you to the development teams. How quickly can you review technical documentation and system specifications? Give me a weekend with the materials, and I'll be ready to contribute meaningfully by Monday.
Travis replied, his military confidence reasserting itself as the conversation shifted toward mission parameters and performance expectations. Robert Kim was calculating project assignments that could benefit from Travis's operational experience. We have 3 active defense contracts that could use someone with your background, real-world implementation experience with the systems we're developing. Terry stood again, signaling that the meeting was transitioning from assessment to planning. Patricia, I want a complete review of our hiring practices within 30 days. We clearly have systemic problems that are preventing us from identifying qualified candidates. And I want to know how many other veterans we've rejected who might possess similar qualifications, Dr. Martinez added. This can't be an isolated case. Travis felt the surreal sensation of watching his life transform in real time. 2 hours earlier, he had been a desperate janitor facing eviction and his daughter's loss of medical coverage. Now he was discussing technical projects and salary negotiations that would provide stability he hadn't experienced since Elena's death. Mr. Moore, Terry said, extending her hand across the conference table. Welcome to Meridian Tech's professional staff. I apologize that it took a foot race to reveal what our hiring process should have identified months ago. Travis shook her hand, feeling the firm grip of someone who valued results over conventional procedures. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to prove my worth. Don't thank me yet, Terry replied, her competitive nature reasserting herself. You'll be working with some of the best technical teams in the defense industry. I expect you to earn that doubled salary through performance, not just because you can outrun the CEO. As the meeting concluded and Travis prepared to leave the conference room, he felt the weight of expectations and opportunities that extended far beyond his immediate financial needs. He had secured not just employment, but professional recognition, the chance to contribute meaningfully to projects that utilized his expertise rather than simply providing minimum wage survival. Walking through Meridian Tech's corridors as an executive rather than a janitor, Travis carried the knowledge that his desperate gambit had succeeded beyond his wildest hopes. Tomorrow, he would tell Sophia that their housing was secure, her medical care was guaranteed, and Daddy had finally found work that matched his capabilities. The transformation was complete, but the real work was just beginning. Monday morning arrived with the crisp clarity that desert autumns brought to Phoenix. But for Travis Moore, the day carried transformative weight that had nothing to do with weather. He stood before the bathroom mirror in their small apartment, adjusting a tie that Sophia had helped him select from the 3 options available in his limited professional wardrobe. The reflection staring back showed a man whose posture had straightened with renewed purpose, whose eyes carried confidence that had been absent for months. "Daddy, you look important," Sophia observed from her position on the couch where she was working through her morning medication routine with increasing independence. Her cerebral palsy made fine motor control challenging, but 9-year-old determination had gradually improved her ability to manage the complex schedule of pills and liquid medications that controlled her seizures. "I feel important, Miha," replied, kneeling to help her with the pill organizer that represented both medical necessity and financial burden. The medication routine that had once terrified Travis with its cost now felt manageable rather than catastrophic. The health insurance that came with his new position would cover Sophia's treatments without the devastating copays and deductibles that had been drowning them in debt. More significantly, the salary increase meant they could afford the specialized physical therapy that might improve Sophia's mobility and independence. Travis arrived at Meridian Tech 45 minutes before his official start time, a military habit that served him well as he navigated the transition from service worker to professional staff. The security guards who had known him as a night janitor did double takes as he approached the executive elevator bank wearing a suit and carrying a leather portfolio instead of cleaning supplies. "Morning, Mr. Moore," called James Rodriguez, the senior security officer who had always treated Travis with respect despite his custodial role. "Heard about your promotion. Congratulations." The news of Travis's dramatic career advancement had spread through Meridian Tech's employee network with the speed that significant events generated in corporate environments. The story of the janitor who had outrun the CEO and earned a massive promotion had become Monday morning coffee conversation throughout the building, inspiring reactions ranging from admiration to skepticism about the fairness of such unconventional advancement. Dr. Sarah Martinez met Travis at the 38th floor reception area, carrying a stack of technical documentation and project files that represented his introduction to active defense contracts. Her expression suggested professional excitement about integrating someone with operational experience into development teams that typically worked from theoretical knowledge rather than battlefield implementation. "Ready for the real test?" Dr. Martinez asked, leading Travis toward the Defense Contracts Division's secure conference room. "Running 4 miles was just the audition. Now you get to prove that your military experience can contribute to technical projects that are currently behind schedule and over budget." The conference room was already occupied by the core development team for Meridian Tech's most ambitious current project, an integrated communication system designed to coordinate multiple military units across diverse operational environments. The technology was conceptually similar to systems Travis had used during force reconnaissance missions, but significantly more advanced and complex. "Everyone, I'd like you to meet Travis Moore, our new senior systems analyst," Dr. Martinez announced to the assembled engineers and project managers. "Travis brings 15 years of operational experience with the types of systems we're developing here." The introductions revealed a team of highly educated professionals whose technical expertise was undeniable, but whose understanding of real-world implementation often remained theoretical. Lead engineer Michael Chen had earned his PhD from Stanford and published extensively on communication network design. Project manager Lisa Thompson held an MBA from Wharton and had managed successful corporate launches across multiple industries. Systems architect David Park had developed networking protocols used by Fortune 500 companies worldwide. None of them had ever used the technology they were creating under combat conditions, where failure meant death rather than project delays. "Travis, we're currently facing integration challenges with our multi-platform coordination system," Michael Chen explained, gesturing toward technical diagrams displayed on the conference room's smartboards. "The theoretical models work perfectly, but our Defense Department liaisons keep requesting modifications that seem to contradict optimal engineering design." Travis studied the technical specifications with growing recognition. The system Meridian Tech was developing closely resembled battlefield networks he had managed during deployments in Afghanistan and Iraq, but with architectural choices that would create vulnerabilities in hostile environments. "The military requests probably aren't contradicting good design," Travis said carefully, aware that he was challenging the work of people whose technical credentials far exceeded his formal education. "They're asking for redundancies and fail-safes that theoretical models don't account for." Lisa Thompson pulled up project timelines that showed increasing delays and cost overruns. "Our clients keep demanding features that add complexity without apparent benefits: radio frequency backup systems, manual override protocols, isolated network segments that reduce overall efficiency." "Those aren't inefficiencies," Travis replied, his confidence growing as the conversation moved toward his areas of expertise. "They're survival mechanisms. In combat environments, primary systems fail regularly. Equipment gets damaged, signal gets jammed, operators get killed or wounded. The backup systems and manual overrides aren't theoretical contingencies, they're operational necessities." The room fell silent as the engineers processed Travis's perspective on their technical challenges. David Park leaned forward, his expression suggesting genuine curiosity rather than defensive skepticism. "Can you give us specific examples of how these systems fail in real-world conditions?" Park asked. "Our testing protocols are based on laboratory standards and computer simulations." Travis spent the next 30 minutes describing communication failures he had experienced during actual operations. Electronic warfare that disabled primary networks, equipment damage from improvised explosive devices, coordination breakdowns that occurred when standard protocols encountered unexpected battlefield conditions. "Jesus," Michael Chen muttered, taking notes rapidly as Travis described a mission where communication failure had nearly resulted in friendly fire casualties. "Most civilian designs would," acknowledged. That's why military specifications seem overcomplicated. They're not designed for optimal conditions. They're designed for worst-case scenarios where everything goes wrong simultaneously. Lisa Thompson was recalculating project timelines based on Travis's insights. If we redesign our architecture to incorporate these operational requirements, we could actually reduce development time by eliminating features that don't work in real-world conditions. The meeting that had begun as Travis's introduction to the development team evolved into a comprehensive review of the project's fundamental assumptions. His operational experience provided context that transformed theoretical challenges into practical engineering solutions, while his technical background allowed him to communicate effectively with the civilian engineers. Dr. Martinez observed the transformation with professional satisfaction. "Travis, I think you're going to fit in well here. The team has been struggling with these integration issues for months." Over the following hours, Travis was introduced to 3 additional defense projects where his operational experience could provide valuable perspectives. Each project revealed the same pattern: technically proficient teams developing sophisticated solutions that missed critical implementation challenges that combat veterans understood intuitively. The irony wasn't lost on Travis that Meridian Tech had been paying him minimum wage to empty trash cans while struggling with technical problems that his expertise could have solved months earlier. The institutional barriers that had kept him trapped in custodial work had cost the company both time and money, while preventing him from contributing meaningfully to projects he understood better than most of their professional staff. By afternoon, Travis had been assigned to lead operational integration reviews for all 3 defense contracts, a role that would require him to evaluate technical designs from the perspective of end users who would depend on the technology under life-threatening conditions. The responsibility felt familiar and energizing, the return to work that mattered beyond paycheck survival. "How was your first day as a real employee?" Dr. Martinez asked as Travis prepared to leave the office at 6 p.m., a luxury made possible by no longer working double shifts between custodial and warehouse jobs. "Like remembering who I used to be," Travis replied, surprising himself with the honesty of the response. "I hadn't realized how much I missed contributing to something meaningful." The drive home through Phoenix traffic felt different, with professional satisfaction replacing the exhausted desperation that had characterized his previous routine. Travis carried project files and technical documentation that he would review that evening, work that utilized his expertise rather than simply demanding his time. Sophia was waiting for homework and excited questions about Daddy's new job. Her breathing seemed clearer than it had in weeks, possibly reflecting reduced stress in their household or simply the psychological effect of stability replacing uncertainty. "Tell me about building things again," Sophia requested, settling beside Travis on their couch as she had done countless times during the difficult months when storytelling provided escape from financial anxiety. But tonight, Travis's stories were about current projects rather than past achievements. He described communication systems that would help soldiers coordinate safely, technology that would prevent the kind of mistakes that cost lives during combat operations. His work had meaning beyond survival, purpose beyond paying bills. As Sophia fell asleep against his shoulder, Travis felt the quiet satisfaction of someone whose professional identity had been restored through recognition rather than charity. The desperate janitor who had begged for any employment had become a valued expert whose contributions would shape technology that saved lives. The transformation was complete. But Travis understood that proving his worth would require sustained performance rather than dramatic gestures. Tomorrow would bring new challenges and opportunities to demonstrate that veteran expertise deserved recognition in corporate environments. For the first time since Alana's death, Travis Moore felt like himself again. 3 weeks into his new role as senior systems analyst, Travis had established himself as an indispensable member of Meridian Tech's defense contracts team. His operational insights had already prevented 2 costly design flaws that could have resulted in contract cancellations, and his ability to translate between military requirements and civilian engineering had accelerated project timelines significantly. But success in his professional life couldn't shield him from a crisis that threatened to expose the careful balance he had constructed between his past and present. The morning began normally enough, with Travis reviewing overnight communications from Defense Department liaisons who were testing Meridian Tech's integrated communications system at Fort Bragg. The feedback was overwhelmingly positive, with military personnel praising the system's reliability and intuitive operation under simulated combat conditions. Travis felt professional satisfaction reading reports that validated his contributions to the project's development. His concentration was interrupted by Dr. Martinez entering his office with an expression that suggested urgent concern. She carried a laptop displaying what appeared to be a news website, though Travis couldn't immediately determine the source of her obvious distress. "Travis, we need to talk," Dr. Martinez said, closing his office door and settling into the chair across from his desk. "There's been a development that could affect your security clearance and your position here." Travis felt familiar tension building in his shoulders, the physiological response that had preceded dangerous situations during his military service. Security clearances were essential for defense contract work, and any threat to his clearance could eliminate the professional stability he had finally achieved. "What kind of development?" Travis asked, his voice maintaining the controlled tone that military training had ingrained during crisis situations. Dr. Martinez turned her laptop screen toward Travis, revealing a military news website displaying an article with a headline that made his blood run cold: "Marine Corps investigating war crimes allegations in Operation Desert Shield." Below the headline was a photograph that Travis recognized immediately: his former reconnaissance unit during their second deployment to Afghanistan. The article mentioned several Marines from force reconnaissance units, including Staff Sergeant Travis Moore, who allegedly participated in unauthorized interrogations of captured insurgents. Travis stared at the screen, reading accusations that distorted events from 5 years earlier into something unrecognizable. The article described enhanced interrogation techniques and violations of Geneva Convention protocols that bore no resemblance to the operations he had actually conducted. But the names, dates, and unit designations were accurate enough to make the allegations seem credible to readers without first-hand knowledge of military operations. "Travis, I need you to tell me the truth about what happened during that deployment," Dr. Martinez said, her tone suggesting she was speaking as an ally rather than an investigator. "Terry and I are prepared to support you, but we need to understand the facts before this becomes a larger issue." Travis closed his eyes briefly, mentally reviewing events that he had processed extensively during post-deployment counseling and official debriefings. The accusations in the article were based on partial information that had been leaked by someone with incomplete knowledge of classified operations. "The article is describing a joint operation with Army Special Forces," Travis began, his voice steady despite the emotions stirring within him. "We were tasked with gathering intelligence about insurgent networks that were targeting civilian populations. Everything we did was authorized, documented, and conducted according to established protocols." Dr. Martinez was taking notes, her engineering background helping her approach the situation methodically. "Can you provide documentation that contradicts these allegations?" "Most of the operational details remain classified," Travis replied, recognizing the impossible position that classification restrictions created. "I can't discuss specific methods or sources without violating security protocols that could result in criminal charges." The cruel irony wasn't lost on Travis that the same security clearance requirements that made him valuable to Meridian Tech also prevented him from defending himself against false accusations. Classified operations created perfect conditions for distorted narratives because the truth remained locked behind security protocols that participants couldn't violate without destroying their own careers. Dr. Martinez's phone buzzed with a text message that further complicated the situation. "Terry wants to see you in her office immediately. The article is generating media attention, and we're receiving calls from Defense Department liaisons asking about your background." Walking through Meridian Tech's corridors toward Terry Garcia's executive suite, Travis felt the familiar weight of approaching judgment that had preceded every significant crisis in his adult life. The same media scrutiny that could destroy his professional reputation might also expose his family to public attention that Sophia was too young to handle. Terry's corner office overlooked the Phoenix skyline, but her attention was focused entirely on computer screens displaying multiple news sources and social media feeds. The military news article had been picked up by several veteran advocacy websites, generating comment threads filled with speculation and political arguments about military conduct overseas. "Sit down, Travis," Terry said, her voice carrying the controlled tension of someone managing a potential crisis. I assume Sarah has briefed you about the article and its potential implications. Yes, ma'am, Travis replied, falling back on military formality during stressful situations. I want to be clear that the allegations described in that article are false, but I'm limited in what I can discuss due to classification restrictions. Terry studied Travis's expression with the assessing gaze she used during high-stakes business negotiations. I've built this company by trusting my judgment about people's character. Your performance over the past 3 weeks has been exemplary, and nothing in your background check suggested any disciplinary issues during your military service. There weren't any, Travis confirmed. My discharge was honorable, my performance evaluations were excellent, and I received commendations for the operations that are now being mischaracterized in the media. Terry's phone rang with a call that she answered on speaker, revealing Robert Kim's voice with obvious stress. Terry, we have a problem. Defense Department liaison Colonel Williams just called asking about Travis Moore's background. The Pentagon is conducting a preliminary investigation into the allegations, and they're recommending that we suspend his security clearance pending review. Travis felt his carefully reconstructed professional life beginning to collapse again. Security clearance suspension would eliminate his ability to work on defense contracts, effectively ending his employment at Meridian Tech despite his proven capabilities and contributions. How long would this investigation take? Terry asked, her business instincts calculating timelines and impacts. Could be months, Kim replied. These military investigations move slowly, especially when they involve classified operations. Even if Travis is completely vindicated, the suspension could last long enough to disrupt our current contracts. Terry ended the call and turned back toward Travis, her expression suggesting she was formulating solutions rather than simply acknowledging problems. Travis, I need to ask you directly, is there any possibility that these allegations have merit? None, Travis replied without hesitation. I've never participated in unauthorized interrogations or violated any military protocols. The operations described in that article are being deliberately mischaracterized, probably by someone with limited access to classified information. Then we're going to fight this, Terry announced, her competitive nature fully engaged. I'm not losing a valuable employee because someone leaked partial information to journalists who don't understand military operations. Dr. Martinez looked surprised by Terry's decisiveness. Terry, if the Defense Department is recommending clearance suspension, we might not have a choice about continuing his employment on classified projects. Then we'll create non-classified projects that utilize his expertise. Travis's operational experience is valuable beyond defense contracts. We have civilian applications that could benefit from his insights. Travis felt a mixture of gratitude and concern about Terry's willingness to support him. Ma'am, I appreciate your confidence, but I don't want to create problems for the company. If my presence becomes a liability— You're not a liability, Terry interrupted. You're an asset who's being unfairly targeted by people who profit from controversy. We're going to weather this storm and prove that character matters more than media speculation. The remainder of the afternoon was consumed by legal consultations and crisis management planning, as Meridian Tech's leadership team developed strategies for protecting both Travis's position and the company's defense contracts. The situation revealed the vulnerability that all veterans faced when classified operations became subjects of political debate. That evening, Travis sat with Sophia in their apartment, helping her with homework while wrestling with decisions that could affect their future. The financial stability he had finally achieved was threatened by events beyond his control, accusations that distorted his service record into something unrecognizable. Daddy looks worried again, Sophia observed, with the perceptiveness that 9-year-olds sometimes displayed. Is it work trouble? Some people are saying things about Daddy's military service that aren't true, explained Travis carefully. It might cause problems at work, but we're going to handle it together. Sophia nodded with the acceptance that children showed when adults faced challenges beyond their control, like when kids at school say mean things that aren't true. Something like that, Mija agreed, struck by his daughter's ability to simplify complex situations into manageable concepts. As Sophia fell asleep that night, Travis reviewed legal documents and media coverage that would determine whether his professional redemption could survive political controversy. The same military service that had finally been recognized and valued was now being weaponized against him by people who had never faced the moral complexities of combat operations. The battle for his reputation and career was just beginning. But Travis Moore had learned during 15 years of military service that the hardest fights were often the most important ones to win. The crisis that had been simmering beneath the surface of Travis's new professional life exploded into public attention when investigative reporter Amanda Chen published a follow-up article that named him specifically and included details about his employment at Meridian Tech. The Phoenix Business Journal picked up the story, framing it as a defense contractor potentially employing someone under investigation for war crimes. Within hours, Meridian Tech's stock price had dropped 12%, and Terry Garcia was fielding calls from board members demanding immediate action. Travis arrived at the office Tuesday morning to find protesters gathered outside the building's main entrance. The small group carried signs reading, "No War Criminals in Corporate America" and "Justice for Military Victims," their chants echoing off the glass facades of the surrounding office towers. Security guards had cordoned off access routes, but the demonstration was generating the kind of negative publicity that could devastate a company dependent on government contracts. "Mr. Moore," called Security Chief James Rodriguez as Travis approached the employee entrance. "Miss Garcia wants to see you immediately. Use the underground parking garage entrance to avoid the media." The basement parking garage felt like a bunker as Travis made his way toward the executive elevators, passing coworkers who averted their eyes rather than acknowledge his presence. The same colleagues who had welcomed his insights during project meetings now treated him like a toxic asset that could contaminate their careers through association. Terry's office had been transformed into a crisis command center, with laptops displaying news feeds, social media monitoring software, and real-time stock price tracking. Dr. Martinez, Robert Kim, and Patricia Wong occupied chairs around Terry's conference table, their expressions suggesting they have been conducting damage control meetings since dawn. "Sit down, Travis," Terry said, her voice carrying strain that hadn't been present during their previous conversations. "We need to discuss the situation and determine our path forward." Travis took the empty chair, noting the formal distance that had replaced the collaborative atmosphere of recent weeks. The transformation felt familiar from military experience, the moment when personnel under investigation became isolated from their units to prevent contamination of ongoing operations. "The board held an emergency meeting at 7 this morning," Patricia Wong began, consulting notes that suggested careful preparation. "They're concerned about the impact on our defense contracts and overall corporate reputation. Several members are recommending immediate suspension pending resolution of the military investigation." Robert Kim pulled up contract documentation on his laptop. Pentagon liaison Colonel Williams called again this morning. They're formally recommending security clearance suspension and suggesting that continued employment could jeopardize our existing contracts. Travis felt the walls closing in as corporate politics aligned against him, but his military training had taught him to focus on mission objectives rather than emotional reactions. What specific evidence are they using to justify these recommendations? "That's the problem," Dr. Martinez replied, her engineering background making her naturally inclined toward evidence-based decision-making. "The allegations are based on leaked information that nobody can verify or refute because the actual operations remain classified." Terry stood and moved toward the windows, staring down at the protesters whose presence represented everything she had worked to avoid during her career building Meridian Tech's reputation. "Travis, I need you to understand the position we're in. This isn't about your guilt or innocence. It's about perception and political pressure." "I understand the business realities," replied, though understanding didn't make the situation less devastating. "The board is demanding a response by 5 p.m. today. Either suspension with pay pending investigation or termination with severance package. Those are the only options they're willing to consider." The silence that followed felt heavy with implications that extended far beyond Travis's employment. Sophia's medical coverage, their apartment, the financial stability that had finally allowed them to plan beyond survival, all threatened by accusations that distorted his military service into something unrecognizable. But before anyone could respond, Terry's assistant knocked urgently on the office door. "Miss Garcia, there's someone here who says he needs to speak with you about Mr. Moore. He's a retired Marine colonel and he says it's urgent." Terry exchanged glances with her colleagues before authorizing the visitor's entry. The man who entered was in his 60s, wearing a business suit but carrying himself with unmistakable military bearing. His gray hair was cut with military precision, and his posture suggested someone accustomed to command authority. "Colonel James Patterson, retired," the visitor announced, extending his hand toward Terry. "I apologize for the unscheduled visit, but I need to speak with you about Staff Sergeant Moore and the allegations being made against him." Travis felt his heart rate spike as he recognized Colonel Patterson, his former commanding officer during the Afghanistan deployment that was now under investigation. Patterson had been the operational commander who had authorized the missions that were being mischaracterized in the media. Travis explained to the room, "Colonel Patterson commanded the joint task force I was assigned to during my second deployment. He has direct knowledge of the operations being described in the news coverage." Colonel Patterson's expression was grave as he addressed Terry directly. "Miss Garcia, I'm here because the allegations against Staff Sergeant Moore are not just false, they're deliberately fabricated by someone seeking to damage reputations for political purposes." "Can you provide evidence to support that claim?" Dr. Martinez asked, her scientific training demanding proof rather than assertions. "I can provide testimony and documentation proving that every operation Travis participated in was fully authorized, properly documented, and conducted according to established protocols. More importantly, I can identify the source of the false information being leaked to the media."
Terry's expression shifted from crisis management to strategic opportunity assessment. "What kind of documentation?" Colonel Patterson pulled a leather portfolio from his briefcase, extracting official documents with military seals and classification markings. Operational after-action reports, commendation letters, and disciplinary records showing that Travis Moore never received any negative evaluations or corrective actions during his entire military career. "The problem is that most of the operational details remain classified," Robert Kim pointed out. "Even if you can prove Travis's innocence, we can't discuss the evidence publicly without violating security protocols." "Actually, we can," Patterson replied, his expression suggesting he had anticipated this challenge. "I've been authorized by the Department of Defense to declassify specific operational summaries related to this investigation. The Pentagon wants to stop the false narrative before it damages other veterans' reputations." Travis stared at his former commanding officer with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. Colonel Patterson was risking his own reputation and retirement security to defend a former subordinate against false accusations. "Colonel, why are you doing this? You could stay out of this controversy entirely." Patterson met Travis's gaze directly. "Because I led those operations, and I know what really happened. Good Marines don't abandon their people when they're under attack, especially when the attack is based on lies." Terry was already calculating the implications of Patterson's offer. "Colonel Patterson, if you can provide documentation that clears Travis and proves these allegations are false, we can hold a press conference that changes the entire narrative." "I can do better than that," Patterson replied. "I can identify the person who leaked the false information and explain their motivations for distorting the truth." The room's atmosphere transformed as crisis became opportunity, victimization became vindication. Travis felt the familiar sensation of military operations where impossible situations suddenly revealed solutions through unexpected intelligence. "There's more," Patterson continued. "The real story of those operations involves humanitarian actions that saved civilian lives. When the truth comes out, Travis won't just be exonerated, he'll be recognized as a hero." Terry's competitive instincts were fully engaged as she recognized the potential for transforming negative publicity into positive brand recognition. Colonel Patterson, I think we need to discuss strategy for revealing the truth in a way that serves both justice and business interests. Travis sat in Terry's office watching his professional life transform from crisis to vindication, carried forward by a commanding officer who had remembered his loyalty to subordinates even in retirement. The false accusations that had threatened to destroy his career were about to become the foundation for recognition that his military service truly deserved. The real battle was just beginning, but for the first time since the crisis started, Travis felt confident about the outcome. The press conference that Terry Garcia convened for Thursday afternoon transformed Meridian Tech's main conference room into a media battlefield where truth would either triumph or be buried beneath political spin. Local television stations, military journalists, veterans advocacy groups, and business reporters filled every available seat, their cameras and recording equipment creating an atmosphere of high-stakes testimony that reminded Travis of military tribunals he had witnessed during his service. Colonel Patterson sat at the main table beside Terry and Travis, wearing his dress uniform despite being retired for 3 years. The ribbons and decorations on his chest told the story of a 30-year career that had earned him credibility with both military and civilian audiences. In front of him lay declassified documents that would either vindicate Travis completely or raise new questions about military operations that the public rarely understood. "Ladies and gentlemen," Terry began, her voice carrying the controlled confidence that had built Meridian Tech into a major defense contractor. "We are here today to address false allegations that have been made against one of our employees, Senior Systems Analyst Travis Moore, regarding his military service in Afghanistan." The room buzzed with energy as reporters prepared to document what could become either a crisis resolution or a deeper scandal involving military conduct overseas. Travis sat beside Colonel Patterson, feeling the familiar pre-mission tension that had preceded dangerous operations during his force reconnaissance career. "Before we address specific allegations," Terry continued, "I want to establish the context for Mr. Moore's employment at Meridian Tech. 3 weeks ago, Travis was working as a night janitor in this building, despite possessing 15 years of military experience in exactly the technical areas where our company needed expertise." Several reporters exchanged glances at this revelation, recognizing a human interest angle that complicated the simple narrative of a defense contractor employing someone under investigation for war crimes. Colonel Patterson leaned toward the microphone, his command presence immediately focusing the room's attention. "I'm here today to provide testimony about operations that Sergeant Moore participated in during his deployment with Joint Task Force Phoenix in Afghanistan. Everything I'm about to tell you has been declassified specifically to address the false allegations that have been circulating in the media." Travis stared at his former commanding officer as Colonel Patterson began describing the actual missions that had been distorted beyond recognition in the original news coverage. The operations that had been characterized as unauthorized interrogations were revealed as joint humanitarian efforts to locate and rescue civilian populations that had been displaced by insurgent attacks. Staff Sergeant Moore was part of a reconnaissance team tasked with gathering intelligence about insurgent networks that were preventing humanitarian aid from reaching refugee populations, Patterson explained, consulting the declassified documents. "These were not combat operations. They were rescue missions designed to save civilian lives." Amanda Chen, the investigative reporter whose original article had triggered the crisis, raised her hand from the audience. "Colonel Patterson, our sources described enhanced interrogation techniques and violations of Geneva Convention protocols. Are you claiming those sources were completely fabricated?"
Patterson's expression grew stern as he addressed the challenge directly. "I'm not claiming they were fabricated. I'm stating definitively that they were. The sources who provided information for those articles had limited access to classified information and drew conclusions that were completely false." Travis felt his heart rate increase as Colonel Patterson continued his explanation, revealing details about the operations that transformed the narrative from potential war crimes to heroic humanitarian action. The techniques that were characterized as enhanced interrogation were actually standard intelligence gathering protocols used to locate civilians who had been kidnapped by insurgent groups, Patterson explained. Staff Sergeant Moore's team successfully rescued 43 civilians, including 12 children, who would have died in captivity without these operations. The room erupted in questions as reporters struggled to reconcile this version of events with the allegations that had dominated news coverage for the past week. Travis recognized the moment when narrative control shifted from accusers to defenders, truth overwhelming fiction through documented evidence. Dr. Martinez, who had been monitoring social media feeds throughout the press conference, showed Terry her laptop screen. The hashtag veteran vindication was trending on multiple platforms as live coverage of the press conference reached veteran advocacy groups across the country. Colonel Patterson, called a reporter from Military Times, "Can you identify the sources who provided false information to previous news coverage?" Patterson consulted his documentation before responding. The false allegations originated from a former military contractor who was terminated for security violations during the same deployment. This individual had limited access to operational information and apparently fabricated details to support personal grievances against military personnel who had reported his misconduct. Travis felt the weight of false accusations lifting as the truth emerged through official testimony rather than anonymous speculation. The same media attention that had threatened to destroy his reputation was now documenting his vindication and the heroic nature of missions he had participated in. Terry recognized the perfect moment to reclaim narrative control for both Travis and Meridian Tech. The story of Travis Moore's employment at our company illustrates systemic problems with how our society treats veterans who possess valuable expertise but struggle with civilian hiring practices. She gestured toward Travis, encouraging him to address the media directly. Travis was working as a janitor not because he lacked qualifications, but because our corporate hiring systems failed to recognize military experience as relevant to technical positions. Travis stood, feeling the confidence that came from having truth and evidence on his side. "I spent 8 months applying for engineering and analyst positions while cleaning offices at night to provide health insurance for my disabled daughter. The same companies that claimed to support veterans were rejecting my applications without interviews." The human interest angle was resonating with reporters who understood that Travis's story represented broader issues affecting thousands of veterans struggling with civilian employment despite possessing valuable skills. "What changed?" asked a business reporter from the Phoenix Journal. Travis smiled, remembering the desperate gambit that had transformed his life. "I challenged the CEO to a foot race and proved that military training translates into capabilities that corporate America should value rather than overlook." The room filled with laughter as reporters appreciated the unconventional career advancement strategy, but the underlying message about veteran employment resonated beyond entertainment value. Colonel Patterson added closing testimony that elevated Travis's vindication to heroic recognition. "I want to be clear about Staff Sergeant Moore's service record. He received 2 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and commendations for valor during operations that saved civilian lives. The Marines under his leadership completed some of the most dangerous humanitarian missions of the entire Afghanistan conflict." As the press conference concluded, Travis felt the surreal sensation of watching his professional reputation not just restored but elevated beyond anything he had experienced during his military career. The false accusations that had threatened to destroy his life had become the catalyst for recognition that his service truly deserved. Terry stood beside him as reporters conducted follow-up interviews, her expression suggesting business opportunities rather than crisis management. "Travis, I think we're about to receive a lot of attention from companies that want to hire veterans with your background. And from veterans who need advocates willing to fight for recognition rather than charity, Travis replied, recognizing opportunities to help other former military personnel navigate civilian employment challenges. The transformation was complete, but Travis understood that vindication created new responsibilities to use his platform for purposes beyond personal advancement. The battle for his reputation had been won, but the larger war for veteran employment equity was just beginning. 2 years after the press conference that vindicated his military service and transformed his professional reputation, Travis Moore stood in the executive conference room of Phoenix Veteran Solutions, the nonprofit organization he had founded to address the employment challenges that had nearly destroyed his own life. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows of their downtown office space, he could see Meridian Tech's headquarters where his journey from janitor to executive had begun with a desperate plea and a foot race that changed everything. The conference table was surrounded by accomplished professionals whose backgrounds would have been unrecognizable to most corporate recruiters despite their exceptional qualifications. Former Navy SEAL Maria Santos, who had spent 18 months working retail before Travis helped her secure a cybersecurity position at a Fortune 500 company. Ex-Army Ranger David Kim, whose engineering expertise had been overlooked by dozens of hiring managers until Phoenix Veteran Solutions connected him with a defense contractor that valued operational experience. The quarterly numbers are impressive, reported Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the organization's director of operations, whose PhD in organizational psychology had made her invaluable in developing placement strategies that matched veteran capabilities with corporate needs. Travis reviewed the statistics with professional satisfaction that went far beyond personal achievement. Each successful placement represented a family that had avoided the financial desperation he had experienced. Children who wouldn't lose medical coverage because their parents couldn't find work that matched their qualifications. Sophia, now 11 years old and managing her cerebral palsy with confidence that had grown alongside their family's stability, entered the conference room carrying art supplies and homework that she would complete while Travis finished his afternoon meetings. Her physical therapy had improved her mobility significantly, and her academic performance reflected the security that came from knowing Daddy's work was meaningful and financially stable. "How's school today, Mija?" Travis asked, helping her settle at the smaller table where she often worked during his business meetings. "Mrs. Patterson says I'm ready for advanced math next year," Sophia replied with pride that made Travis's chest tighten with emotion. "And I told my class about Daddy's company that helps soldiers find good jobs." The transformation of their family's circumstances felt almost surreal when Travis considered how close they had come to homelessness just 2 years earlier. Sophia's medical care was now managed by specialists rather than emergency room visits. Her medications covered by comprehensive insurance that Travis no longer had to worry about affording. Their apartment had been replaced by a modest house in a neighborhood with good schools and playgrounds where Sophia could interact safely with other children. The stability that had once seemed impossible was now taken for granted, allowing them to focus on growth rather than survival. "Travis, we have a situation that requires your attention," said Marcus Thompson, Phoenix Veteran Solutions corporate liaison, whose job involved negotiating with companies that were resistant to veteran hiring despite public claims of support. Travis felt familiar anger rising at institutional barriers that prevented capable veterans from accessing opportunities they had earned through service and sacrifice. The same systemic problems that had forced him to work as a janitor continued to affect thousands of former military personnel whose expertise was being wasted by corporate hiring practices. "What's our leverage with TechFlow?" Travis asked, his strategic thinking automatically shifting towards solutions rather than simply acknowledging problems. "They're bidding on a major defense contract that requires veteran hiring quotas," Marcus replied. "We could recommend that our government liaisons review their compliance with federal veteran employment requirements." The transformation of Travis's professional influence felt remarkable when he considered his position just 2 years earlier. Phoenix Veteran Solutions had become a respected advocacy organization whose recommendations carried weight with both government agencies and major corporations. Travis's vindication and subsequent success had created a platform that affected policy rather than just individual placements. Dr. Walsh pulled up presentation slides that documented their broader impact on veteran employment practices across Arizona. Our corporate training programs have been adopted by 47 companies, and we're seeing measurable improvements in veteran retention rates and job satisfaction scores. The work felt meaningful in ways that extended far beyond Travis's personal redemption. Every company that improved their veteran hiring practices, every HR department that learned to recognize military experience as an asset rather than a liability, represented systemic change that would benefit future generations of service members transitioning to civilian careers. Terry Garcia entered the conference room carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of someone delivering excellent news. Despite Travis leaving Meridian Tech to start Phoenix Veteran Solutions, they had maintained both professional and personal relationships that reflected mutual respect rather than competitive tension. "Congratulations," Terry announced, setting the champagne on the conference table. "Senator Williams just called to inform me that the Veterans Employment Recognition Act passed committee review. Your testimony last month was apparently the deciding factor." Travis felt pride that went beyond personal achievement as he processed the implications. The federal legislation that Phoenix Veteran Solutions had helped draft would require government contractors to demonstrate meaningful veteran hiring rather than simply meeting numerical quotas. More importantly, it would provide funding for programs that help companies recognize and utilize military expertise effectively. Dr. Walsh pulled up presentation slides that documented their broader impact on veteran employment practices across Arizona. Our corporate training programs have been adopted by 47 companies, and we're seeing measurable improvements in veteran retention rates and job satisfaction scores. The work felt meaningful in ways that extended far beyond Travis's personal redemption. Every company that improved their veteran hiring practices, every HR department that learned to recognize military experience as an asset rather than a liability, represented systemic change that would benefit future generations of service members transitioning to civilian careers. Terry Garcia entered the conference room carrying a bottle of champagne and wearing the satisfied expression of someone delivering excellent news. Despite Travis leaving Meridian Tech to start Phoenix Veteran Solutions, they had maintained both professional and personal relationships that reflected mutual respect rather than competitive tension. "Congratulations," Terry announced, setting the champagne on the conference table. "Senator Williams just called to inform me that the Veterans Employment Recognition Act passed committee review. Your testimony last month was apparently the deciding factor." Travis felt pride that went beyond personal achievement as he processed the implications. The federal legislation that Phoenix Veteran Solutions had helped draft would require government contractors to demonstrate meaningful veteran hiring rather than simply meeting numerical quotas. More importantly, it would provide funding for programs that help companies recognize and utilize military expertise effectively. "This means sustainable change rather than just individual success stories," Dr. Walsh observed, her academic background helping her appreciate the policy implications. Sophia looked up from her homework with the curiosity that 11-year-olds showed when adults discussed matters that seemed important. "Daddy, does this mean more soldiers will get good jobs like you did?" "That's exactly what it means, Mija," Travis replied, kneeling beside his daughter's chair. "And it means other kids won't have to worry about their parents finding work after they finish serving our country." The conversation continued through the afternoon as Travis and his team planned implementation strategies for the new legislation. But his attention kept returning to Sophia's question and its larger implications. The desperate janitor who had begged for any employment had become an advocate whose work would affect thousands of families facing similar challenges. As evening approached and Sophia packed her school supplies, Travis stood at the conference windows looking toward Meridian Tech's headquarters where his transformation had begun. The building that had once represented everything he couldn't access now served as a reminder of how dramatically circumstances could change when people are willing to recognize worth regardless of conventional credentials. "Ready to go home?" Sophia asked, her walker decorated with new stickers that reflected her growing confidence and personality. Ready, Travis replied, though he paused for a moment to appreciate the view of downtown Phoenix where his family had found both crisis and redemption. Walking through the parking garage toward their reliable sedan, a practical choice that reflected financial security rather than luxury, Travis carried the quiet satisfaction of someone whose professional purpose aligned with personal values. The work that had begun as desperate survival had evolved into meaningful advocacy that would outlast his individual contributions. Sophia chatted about school projects and weekend plans while Travis drove through evening traffic that no longer felt like a race against time and financial disaster. Their conversations had shifted from anxiety about immediate needs to planning for future opportunities and adventures. That night, as Sophia settled into bed in her own room filled with books, art supplies, and the accumulated treasures of a childhood that had finally achieved stability, Travis reviewed correspondence from veterans across the country who were seeking assistance with employment challenges that he understood intimately. Each letter represented a family that might avoid the desperation he had experienced. Parents who wouldn't have to choose between pride and survival. Children who wouldn't lose their homes because qualified adults couldn't find work that matched their capabilities. Travis Moore had discovered that the strongest bridges weren't built with steel and concrete, but with recognition that every person possessed worth that transcended their employment circumstances. Sometimes, the most important construction projects involved building connections between human potential and institutional opportunity. The janitor who had challenged a CEO to a foot race had become an advocate whose work would help thousands of veterans find their rightful places in corporate America. The transformation was complete, but the mission would continue as long as qualified people needed champions willing to fight for recognition rather than charity. In the quiet of his home office, surrounded by commendations from military organizations and corporate partnerships that were changing hiring practices across the country, Travis planned tomorrow's work with the same dedication he had once brought to combat missions. The race that had changed his life had become a marathon of advocacy that would benefit veterans for generations to come. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.